Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stacy Best. I am the executive director here at Lawyers Concerned for Lawyers, and today I will be your guest moderator in the place of our usual host, Amy Levine. Again, thank you for joining us today on the webinar for busy lawyers, Growth Mindset for today's law practice. I'm joined today by Luz Carrion, who will get started in just a moment. But for those of you who may be new to LCL, I just want to let you know that our mission at LCL is to promote well-being and resilience in the legal community, improve lives, nurture competence, and elevate the standing of the legal profession. Today's webinar builds on a previous webinar by Dr. Tracey Meyers, who is one of our clinical staff, and her webinar was on growth mindset, rethinking our relationship to stress. You can view that program by clicking on the link from our homepage related to this program. And today, Attorney Carrion is going to give us some tips and insights on how to apply the growth mindset to ways that to our legal practice and to improve our legal practice and make better use of the stress that we find as practicing lawyers. Ms. Carrion is a senior law practice advisor. She does one-on-one consultations. All of our staff in the practice management area, as well as the clinical staff, do provide one-on-one consultations, but we also do programming such as this, customized programming, and events to support the legal community. And speaking of events, I want to invite you to mark your calendars for May 2nd for Recovery Day. It is an open meeting sponsored by the recovery community of LCL that will help educate others of us in supporting those who are in recovery, learning more about recovery, being able to have a chance to reflect on our own relationship with alcohol or substances and seek help if we find that we are indeed in need. Without further ado, Luz, I'm going to turn it over to you. One more matter of housekeeping. We do take questions at the end. Feel free to put them in the chat or the Q&A button on your screen, and I will put them to Luz at the end of her presentation. Luz, take it away.
Thank you so much, Stacy, and thank you all the viewers for making space and for your time for this webinar. I'm going to start by sharing my screen, so bear with me 1 second. Okay. So let me start with the agenda. Today, we are going to be expanding on a prior webinar, like Stacy mentioned earlier, by Dr. Tracey Meyers. If you did not get a chance or an opportunity to review that webinar, that's okay. You will get the slides after the presentation, and for the recording, when you get the recording, you're going to get the slides as well with live links. So that this is another option for you to click on this link and review that webinar. It has a wealth of information, and we're going to talk about the key takeaways and apply them to practice management and professionalism. After the key takeaways, that includes some research that Dr. Meyers mentioned in her webinar on stress and mindset. We're going to apply those techniques and solutions or tips that Dr. Meyers gave us based on this research. We're going to apply that to a few examples. So we're going to have an interactive part during this webinar where we're doing a little hands-on exercise. And we are going to conclude with some action steps, a call of action for you to take some small steps and continue this reflection and practice. Again, I mentioned that there's another link for her webinar. And one of the key takeaways from Dr. Meyers' webinar is her discussion on stress. What creates stress? She described these three situations that create that friction and stress in our day-to-day practice. Conflict, we this is an adversarial system, right? There's always conflict, but there's also conflict when there's something that you want and you wish, let's say in your practice, for example, but you don't have it. That's another type of conflict and another perspective for viewing conflict that causes this stress and friction in our day-to-day practice. There's also uncertainty, and we have that in our practice, in our day-to-day, and how we have to navigate a lot of uncertainty these days that creates a great amount of stress, especially if there are changes in the law that you did not anticipate, and now you're trying to figure out what's a strategy or where to go in a case if you're not clear on the precedent that we had is no longer that clear in some circumstances. And there's always the pressure. Um, and Dr. Meyer rightfully so mentioned that we as lawyers have tremendous pressure in terms of performing better and quicker and faster. And we see that with the advent of AI, now clients are expecting a faster solution, a more efficient solution, and a more cost-effective solution. So that's added pressure that we have in our practice. And building on those three areas of sources of stress, conflict, uncertainty, and pressure, we learn from Dr. Myers that there's a point where we can, if we allow ourselves some time and space to pivot. I like the word pivoting because it's just small change of direction. And what happens when we have, she talks about the mindset, that's the distinguishing factor. When we have conflict, uncertainty, and pressure, and then we set in on panic, performance anxiety, depression, loss of interest, stress-related illness. Those, as she explained, and she's really good, I have to say, explaining the science behind how the brain works and the nervous system works under these stressors. So again, I invite you to watch the webinar in more detail so that you get to learn the biology and the physiology behind how stress affects us. So there is this sweet spot that she mentions. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, where we can pivot and then turn conflict, uncertainty, and pressure into motivation and peak performance, stress-related growth, and physiological thriving. And that is mindset, okay? And I have in the little sticky note here, the brain's frontal lobe and the prefrontal cortex. The way that I learned this science from our clinicians here at LCL was that we have the amygdala, which triggers our fight or flight response. And that's when we get conflict, uncertainty, and pressure, the amygdala starts that process into fight or flight. So when I looked at the diagrams of the brain, I'm a very visual person. So I visualize, okay, the amygdala is like somewhere here buried in the back. And then we have the frontal lobe right here in our front. That's a rational part. This is the part where we have reasoning, we have judgment, And so my visual always when I have these stressors is like, okay, it's time to move from back here to here, okay? And allowing that space to say, okay, slow down, what's going on? And we're going to talk about um, what do you feel in terms of your body response to stress. And just to realize, okay, this is not an emergency, like, um, if you're fight or flight, like you're in imminent or immediate danger. So you're like, okay, I'm not in imminent danger. There is some stress. And so we're going to continue um, with Dr. Meyers' description and explanation of the sweet spot that she mentions. And so this is backed by research. And she explains in her presentation, this is the sweet spot, the red arrow. So when we are under stress, uh, sometimes it's very low stress, and that is not going to motivate us much to reach peak performance, right? Then we have medium stress, and trying to find this sweet spot takes practice um, and mindfulness, because this is where we want to try to get the information about the stressors. We're going to talk about that. And then so that we can turn that stress information into peak performance. Because if we miss this spot and we keep going, now our performance under high stress is going to decrease. And I'm sorry, Dr. Meyers gives us these 3 clear steps, easy steps that we can start practicing. Okay, when we feel stress, one of the things that she pointed out, we're not ignoring stress, we're not suppressing stress. Okay, we're going to acknowledge that we feel stressful. It is what it is. Like, yes, we feel that stress, and don't be judgmental. This is information, okay? And again, we're talking about mild to moderate stress. These are kind of see it as the daily frictions that that cause stress in our day-to-day practice. Um, so when we acknowledge that stress and we ask ourselves, for example, okay, why are my palms sweaty? Why is my chest, my heart rate increasing? Those are that's the physiological response to stress. Okay, why is it that my hands are shaking? Why do I feel like dizzy or lightheaded? Right? So it takes a few seconds for us to kind of acknowledge that. We're gonna welcome it. Again, we're not judging us. We need to approach this with self-compassion, and that's very difficult for attorneys to do, and it takes practice. The second step is to welcome the stress. We're going to acknowledge, right, and welcome that stress. And what I really liked about Dr. Meyers' presentation is this line, you are stressed because you care. And so going back to the graph here, if you don't have stress, usually, your not only the level of performance decreases, but, you're like, okay, you know what, sometimes there's something that you don't care about. It doesn't, I'm not talking about law related situations in personal life. Like maybe if you see a headline or read an article and it's like, that doesn't trigger like any emotions. I don't care about this. So you're not feeling stressed out. When you start feeling the stress, it's because you care about that topic, that situation, that issue. So that's what we're going to do in terms of moving from step 2 to step 3 is utilizing that stress. Stress is designed to facilitate and move us in the right direction. So let's do that pivot where we're going to use that stress. We're stressed because we care, and we're going to harness that energy in the right direction. Again, think about that sweet spot, and you want to go up. Let me talk about some limitations. There was something very important that attorney I'm sorry, I keep saying Attorney Myers. My apologies. Dr. Myers, she's a psychologist. Um, he says that these techniques that we're learning in her program and continuing in this program, these are not designed to deal with with trauma or traumatic events or with prolonged persistent stress. She gave the example of someone going through the aftermath of a hurricane. I think she mentioned Katrina, if I recall correctly, but someone who goes through that traumatic event, cannot, that situation is not the ideal situation to apply these techniques that we're going to talk about, mindset and growth mindset. Um, Again, if you have illness, serious illness, this is not these techniques and what we're going to practice is not designed for those circumstances. For those circumstances, you need to seek professional help. You can start the conversation with one of our clinicians, and they can refer you to um, professionals in the field because that needs to be addressed and that needs to be acknowledged as well. And I want to emphasize, like Dr. Myers did, that we're not oversimplifying serious trauma. We're honoring that trauma exists, and we're going to respect that this trauma exists. We're not ignoring situations where individuals have been exposed to persistent trauma, and people who have been in prolonged exposure to systems that might be oppressive or are oppressive. And so those situations, we have to honor that there's many of us that have experienced these instances of structural and systemic barriers, and we have to recognize that. And so use this framework to support decision making, not to minimize those realities. Now, Dr. Myers also discussed the growth mindset and the fixed mindset. Here, I want to pivot a little bit and focus more on these tips that I have on the right hand of the slide. Clio, which is a legal product, legal technology product, a practice management product, a few years ago released this paper called An Anti-Fragile Law Firm, was released in 2023, so a few years ago. But I like it because it gives you that growth mindset perspective. They actually address growth mindset in one of the blogs. So the idea before the idea with the anti-fragile law firm and the way it's presented in the paper, they're different building blocks. And what is good about that guide, and I will include it with the slides, is that you can focus on one or two blocks, okay, to experiment, innovate, and practice this growth mindset. So these tips are really good. I really like their learning. Growth mindset embraces learning and experimentation, which could lead to innovation. And I know that they in Clio said treat failures as learning opportunities. I don't like that word failure. I rather see them as iteration, okay? Because we can practice or test a new technique in our practice, the daily practice of our firms. And something might not work. It's okay. You can always iterate and tweak it, and that's what drives innovation. So don't feel like, if you tried something, it didn't work, then that's the end. That's a fixed mindset. We want to pivot to a growth mindset where we're like, okay, maybe if we tweak a little bit of the process, gather data. That's another point that I really like here. Seek client feedback to guide improvement. So let's go back to the client. How can we improve this part of the process better and get that and collect that data? So we are watching, or we are seeing stress as information. And in the context of practice management, we see this as learning. Okay, so you can apply that. Learning includes learning how stress manifests within you. And then also, how do we come up with a solution that you test and then you adjust? Now we're getting into the exercise part of our program. We're going to test this. So we're doing a number, one of the second step in the Venn here. Choose one of these. Rewriting the same emails, is that a frustration, a stressor for you? Re-entering the same data. Manual tracking. So do you have paper calendars, to-do list, something in your computer, and you're tracking manually everything? Is that frustrating to you or causes stress? Or the last one is avoiding technology. This is something also that sometimes comes with a fixed mindset, but also stressors that we feel overwhelmed. Okay, and we're avoiding technology because we don't know it, and it feels unfamiliar. So we kind of tend to gravitate to what we know, right? So choose one of these or bring your own. If none of these apply to you, pick your own frustration or stressor. You're welcome to write it down in the chat, or if you can make a note, even better for yourself. Either type it or write it down. Choose one. Now, let's do this exercise. And again, I welcome comments. You can enter the answers in the chat. If not, that is okay. You can write them down so that you have something to work with. So let's start with step one, acknowledge. Okay. So where is the friction? Okay. Try to answer these questions. What keeps repeating? What feels inefficient? What slows you down? So from the prior slide, what is it specifically from your frustration, the frustration that you chose? That what part keeps repeating? And what's the inefficiency that you want? You have to articulate the issue that is causing this stress so that we can then explore a solution. We have here validate. This is something also that Dr. Meyers mentioned to me when I was doing the slides, and I think it's really important. It's okay, like we said, we're not judging here. This is hard, I'm afraid of failing. So if you have those feelings, that's okay. Okay, we're going to validate that. And this is information. Remember, this is all information that you're collecting data. Then and you can add under this second step, if there's any other emotion or feeling that you have in relationship to the frustration, write it down. Next step, the third step is welcoming. Why does it matter? And remember, you stress because you care. Okay, this is why this is frustrating and stressing for you, because you care about this. You want to do better. or improve a workflow or a system. Okay. But let's explore that a little bit deeper. Let's unpack that and try to address why does it matter? Is it because you're wasting time? It's taking too much time? Is it because it's causing a lot of stress? Is it because it's affecting the client service? Or all of the above? If you have staff, is this affecting your staff's, morale and performance? Then we're going to move on to utilize. What is one small thing I could try? Okay, so we're back. So I was talking about one test, and it's okay if you have to adjust the test. That's just you're fine tuning. Okay, you're innovating. Okay, and iterating. So it's okay if you have to adjust the test. Finally, this is something that Dr. Myers also recommended that I emphasize: positive reinforcement. Okay, recognize and appreciate your willingness to try something new. So if we get here, we're even acknowledging that you're willing to try something new. That's fantastic. That's fantastic. So we can celebrate that, because the most difficult part in managing change and trying something new is just where to start, and those how do I figure out those first 2 to 3 steps to get me started, to get me going. So that's good. If you can only at this point get to that, just that part, that's great. We're gonna honor that. We're gonna segue into technology, and this is where technology helps. If you chose one of the frustrations that was in the prior slide, technology could help you reducing that repetition and reducing those decisions that it's the same decision that you do time after time, right? In certain patterns or workflows or situations, okay? And technology also helps you in reducing errors. For example, if you're doing cut and paste, on a template, you know that there's a lot of room for error, because you might forget to cut and paste in one part, and you might be transferring some one client's name or information or docket number into another. So there's technology out there that can help you with a template that automatically populates all those fields, and you don't have to do it manually. So think about technology, and this is a good approach if you're doing embracing or practicing that growth mindset. Let's try, and explore which technology can help you improve some processes. And again, start small, the low-hanging fruit. So what working smarter looks like. This means fewer repeated decisions, less manual work, clearer systems, and using technology that saves effort and doesn't create extra work. And even one step further, trying to aim to achieve these goals will create space to recognize stress as information about ethical concerns. So we're pivoting now into professionalism and ethics, because what happens is if you are in, you don't have the clearest systems, you're doing a lot of manual work, a lot of repeated decisions, and not using some technology that could help you streamline everything, you're going to be always trying to catch up, putting out fires, right? Constantly. You're going to get fatigued and exhausted or overwhelmed, which could then turn into burnout. And we don't want to go that far deep into it. We want to try to have these systems in place so that you can have more space to recognize ethical issues or ethical problems that we face in our practice. So how does that look? So when we have this ethical stress, what I'm calling ethical stress, okay, this is information. And what it means is that you need to pause and assess the ethical issue. Um, Sometimes we get um, that feeling. You know what? You just feel like, okay, I don't think this is ethical, or I think there might be an ethics problem here. And you know what I mean, because sometimes we're like, okay, slow down. And so that's a place where you have to pause and then pivot into this growth mindset. Okay. And if we go back to the 3 steps that Dr. Myers gave us in the context of ethics, okay, slow down, acknowledge that stress, um, that ethical stress, right? That acknowledge that there is a potential ethics concern or dilemma that you think, you need to slow down and you need to assess this, okay? Welcome that stress, because a lot of us feel that fear. Oh my gosh, is my client gonna file a complaint against me? Is the BBO going to investigate me? And that stress is normal, but we have to manage it. We're not suppressing it, we're acknowledging it, remember, and validating it. So welcome the stress and remember your stress because you care. The third step is utilizing that stress, and this is where it's important. Take that pause, and some of us are able to say, okay, I think there's a rule, an ethical rule that addresses this situation, and let me go and research this. Okay, that's good because you're engaging in that growth mindset. Like, okay, I think it's this rule. I'm not sure. Let me go and explore this. And that's great in the ethics context. You can embrace that growth mindset and try to figure it out on your own. But if you can't, that's okay because you have options. And the important thing is that if you're not able to pinpoint which rule applies or you're not sure of your ethical analysis in the particular situation, there are options for you. You can call LCL. We can brainstorm. We cannot give legal advice or an ethics opinion, but we can brainstorm and guide you through the potential rules that could be implicated. There's also the BBO, the Office of the Bar Council. They have an ethics hotline. So you have options. The important thing is that you slow down and use that ethical stress in a way that will foster this growth mindset. And when you practice that, it takes time, but with practice, you get better. So you're going to be more attuned to your ethical obligations and duties. Taking that pause. And again, I have to emphasize that creating the better systems and more efficient systems, perhaps with the aid of technology, will give you more space to think about these issues. So we have, I'm sorry, I clicked on the wrong. Oh, this is going back. Okay. Okay, the action plans. There you go. This is your homework. So keep the slides, keep your notes, what you wrote throughout the exercise that we did. And here are 3 quick steps. Use what you learned today, okay? Keep your example, try one small change this week, and then observe. So we're gathering data. Okay, did it save time? How much? Did it reduce stress? How? Okay? Does it need adjustment? Like I said, iteration. If you need guidance with your example or with the action steps, the action plan, schedule a consult with us. We're available for consults. They're free and confidential. And that's the next slide. That's my information. You can schedule a consult. look at our website, send me an email. And I would like to thank you again for your time and participation. And we can address the questions at this time.
Thank you, Luz. I don't see any questions right off, so I have a couple of thoughts and as you were talking, observations. One of the things I was thinking about when we talk about stress is that sometimes when we think a situation is stressful or should be stressful and we feel stress ourselves, when we talk to somebody else, I think we try to transmit our stress to get them to care the way we care.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then, sort of leaping forward to your part of the conversation about ethics, sometimes that feels scary too. But as you were also talking about frustration, the thing I wrote down was manually, doing things manually versus using technology, where a person may feel okay with doing it manually, may not feel any stress about it. But then if you raise the ethical concern about losing your paper or losing data that is manual, information that's manual and not computerized, that creates a stress, and sort of thinking through using those steps that you mentioned, sort of thinking through, why do I feel stressed? Because then when somebody else is trying to make me feel stressed, my reaction is like, get off me. I don't want to feel that stress, right? So we
Mm-hmm.
try to ignore it. But instead, if we use the stress to think through the questions, it might be that you realize, by failing to have my things in a digital format, if I lose the one that I have, I've lost it. And then what do I do if I do make a mistake? It causes an error. And I think, you to go back to your, failure as an opportunity. My experience in the disciplinary process is, if there is an error, you kind of have to acknowledge the error, but you do benefit in the process when you're able to communicate what you learned and the steps you took to fix the problem. I don't know if you have any thoughts about all of that as I sort of read. There is a question here.
So let me address that quickly, and then we'll address the
Hmm.
question. No, I agree, and I think it also, I think it goes back even to our law school training, because there is always this fear with ethics, like, oh, the BBO and the ethics, and again, this could be maybe my life experience. I don't know. I think my view or perspective is that the rules are your friend. The rules are created for a reason. And I think rather than teaching lawyers to be afraid of the rules and you have to comply, it doesn't matter that it's inefficient, whatever. I always look at the why of the rule. Why is this created? Okay, is to protect the integrity of our profession and to protect the public and the clients. And I look more also at that integrity of the profession. And again, this could be my perspective in view of my public service. But I think we have to, as lawyers, we have that duty of protect the integrity of the profession, because that's how we get, a bad name, or we get discredited. In looking at the rules as, from a fear point of view, we do ourselves a disservice. Look at the why. Look at the why is this rule here? What is it trying to accomplish? And most of the time it's both, but it could be one
Hmm.
or the other. And they're not
So,
meant to make our lives difficult or a hassle.
So we don't, for instance, though, have a rule about technology, right? But if you think about having physical notes and things that you don't digitize, and think about what are the rules for, then I think it sort of helps us think about, well, why might I want to do something with these notes other than, and you can take a screenshot and sort of, if you have an iPhone, you can scan your notes and then they become digital. You can manipulate them, sort of add them to your files, etc. I don't know if you have other tips. Um, and as you're thinking about that, there's a question. What about a reoccurring phase part of your life versus a situation stress? So I think that's like, how do you handle maybe a situation or circumstance in your life that is stressful? And I think that may be a bit beyond the scope of what we're talking about here today. But when you are under stress in your life, it clearly does impact your practice. And I think, the same process can be applied to coming up with a plan to address the stress in your life. First, though, I think you have to understand what the stress is. Sometimes I think we go out for various reasons. Our mind sort of grasps for the reason of what the stress is. But I think if you can really take some time to uncover what the stress is, why it is, you can then make a plan. And I really like the point of positive reinforcement, but I wrote down gratitude, having the gratitude of being able to like think about a solution, even if you can't immediately execute on it. It's just being grateful that it's in your mind to think about. And that little bit of positive emotion sort of builds on itself as a way forward, which I think is one of the things that's important about the growth mindset, as you said earlier, not to think of it as the end, but as sort of as the beginning.
Absolutely. And just to expand on that and address that question, I think it's that um, discernment where you feel like, okay, this situation, I think that I need a therapist for this. Like this, I need to unpack this with a therapist. And just
Hmm.
recognizing that, it's a sign of gratitude and acknowledging that you're able to reach that decision, right? And just to say, okay, this I need a professional to help me,
Hmm.
right? And
Hmm.
that will require, and I know it's difficult, but I think removing the stigma from seeking help also goes along the way. There's nothing wrong with seeking therapy and just exploring how you're behaving or how you're reacting to certain stressors that might be a response to trauma.
Hmm.
Okay? And
Well,
that,
and when
mhm,
you were talking about that, that sort of brought to mind the issue of fitness to practice.
yes,
And we don't really talk about fitness to practice much beyond law school, but the reality of all the things that lawyers are required to do, or should be doing, or can be doing, is about maintaining that fitness and at a level at which you are serving your clients in a way that the public and the courts and others can expect, and also does one internally proud to be doing. So, like, even though you may be under a constant source of stress or have trauma, I think the point is these techniques actually do apply to decision making, right?
yes.
On a small scale. Doesn't mean you weren't traumatized, doesn't mean you didn't have the experience, doesn't mean that you aren't affected, but you can, in terms of each decision that you have to make in a given space, you can make those decisions better, or more easily if you're focused on sort of a way forward as opposed to maybe even, let's say, a way out.
And I just wanted to go back briefly on the issue of, technology, because what I've been learning throughout this process is that, being in LCL as a practice advisor, is that sometimes we have to gather that data that sometimes us who are kind of like Gen X, maybe some millennials, but Gen X and boomers. I was for even when I went to law school, it was paper, and those were the early days when students were bringing laptops to the classroom, and so we sometimes revert to the notes. There's nothing wrong with that. I think being aware and mindful of when are you using the notes, for what purpose, okay? Why are you doing them manually? And instead creating an inefficiency, because sometimes we're in the day in or day out and we're not able to step back and say, wait a minute,
Mm-hmm.
I think there is technology that can help me centralize everything in one
Mm-hmm.
place. Okay, I just have to kind of pivot a little bit and modify behaviors, start small. Um, but it's okay if you, in that process of transitioning, take notes. Like, for example, I'm the kind of person that um, reading long documents in a PDF on the screen, sometimes I can do it. Sometimes I'm
Mm-hmm.
mentally exhausted and I'm like, okay, I
Mm-hmm.
have to either take a break or print some of the documents.
Or if you have a tablet or an iPad, you can write right on the PDF. It's amazing. And one other tip that I thought of while you were talking is sometimes
Hmm.
I use Chat GPT to
Hmm.
ask how to do a certain thing with technology. So if I've got a program that I don't really know how to do a thing, I will ask Chat GPT um, uh, for instructions. And we have another hot tip here. For people who like writing on paper, consider Rocket Notebook, where you can scan and save them digitally and erase the page and use it again. And I use, I think it's called Notability is the technology that I use. And then I also have a thing called Paper Like over the screen of my tablet, and it allows me to write just like I would on paper. And then the notes are digital, and I can download them, export them, or put them wherever. But I just sort of keep mine in the system and go back and look at them. I used to have a steno pad. I used to do keep my notes on a steno pad. And so
Uh-huh.
this is my modern steno pad. Yeah.
Great, great. So that's great. And I like that our community is pitching in with tech solutions. So that's great. But I also want to let people know and remind them that if they're still on that paper phase, that's okay. Let's start by exploring why you're doing this, and then let's explore something else. That's part of the growth mindset. Let's see if there's some technology out there that can help you, be more efficient with
And
your
now
note taking.
apps are
Hmm.
dime a dozen. There's
Yes.
usually something out there, various price points, but
Hmm.
that can also be a concern for sure.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. And
Yeah.
that could be explored as well. So we can, it's like don't I think one of the takeaways is not let some barriers that are real stop you. Let's address them. Let's address the barriers, or and see if we can come up with another solution. And just that exploration alone, right?
Well, I think that's another aspect of the growth mindset,
Hmm.
right? It's like you
Yes.
see the barrier, but
Hmm.
then when you can begin to question what is it a barrier to really? Or why am I feeling this as a barrier? I don't know if you've ever had the experience of having a problem, feeling like you don't have a solution, or the solutions you thought of were not like viable, and then weeks, months, whatever, days later, you come back and you're like, oh, boom, boom, bang. And it's like, wait, why didn't I think of that in the first place? Or what was hard about that
Yes.
initially?
Hmm.
I feel like that happens to me a lot.
Yes. 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 It happens to me too. And I think it's that, um, okay. When we feel like, I don't have a solution, okay, acknowledge it. Maybe not now, but let's put it in the back burner. Let's come back. And then sometimes it's like, oh, and it just comes back.
Yeah.
And it's engaging in that practice. It takes time. Like this is not over. That's the other thing. I want to be realistic. It doesn't happen overnight. It's
Yeah.
a practice, and it's like the practice of law. The more you practice, the better you get, right?
There's another question in the
Hmm.
chat. What about if the area of law you practice, immigration, is so under attack that you need to rethink your entire practice and do something else? And I'm looking at that question and was thinking back again to this idea of stress response and or when people are provoking a stress response or trying to provoke one. I find that it's most, for me, effective to not give into that stress, to sort of resist the idea of panic. And then recognize I may only be able to take a thing piece by piece or issue by issue. And so, yes, like in immigration, when there's so much changing and so much happening, it feels like you have to know and do it all at once. But where ethics are concerned, first of all, there's the need to sort of reasonable expectation of diligence and knowledge. So you need to be approaching the questions that you face reasonably, being reasonable also in the information you give your clients about the situation and how quickly things are changing, making sure that they're aware that things are very uncertain now in the ways that they are uncertain, and then taking whatever steps you can to mitigate the risks. And again, so where technology is concerned, if there is a technological advancement that is reasonable to use, it's not hugely expensive, things like that, then the court, the BBO, the public, your clients have a right to expect that you would be resorting to those. So knowing all of that doesn't make it impossible. Yes, there are times that are indeed stressful, especially immigration, high stakes, people being, arrested in the airport, people being arrested on the street. But living in that space of fear isn't any more a solution than sort of being able to use the decision making process that we've been talking about to sort of find ways forward. I don't know if you have more to add to that, Luz.
Yes, that's absolutely right. I would add that depending on our life situation, it is okay to rethink if you want to pivot to something else, because just the fact that you're rethinking, that allows you space to go further and explore. Sometimes you want to go, want to rewrite the I want to write the next chapter of my life. And so I've had attorneys, for example, who are not, I've had some immigration lawyers, but I've seen this more in family law context, where they're like, the hostilities are becoming more and more, and they want to pivot to either doing mediation or uncontested divorces, or trying something different like estate planning. And that's okay. If you think that, maybe I should rethink this, okay, acknowledge it and explore it. It's There's something that gives you the same passion and motivation and satisfaction that at one point immigration law gave you, right? That's
Mm.
okay too. Explore that. That's not a failure. We grow and we evolve. But having said that, it is also true that if you let the stress go, um, take you into that panic mode, you develop tunnel vision, and like you said, you're not assessing the reality in a more objective way. Absolutely. But it's okay if you want to
Another
pivot
thing
and something different. And yeah.
But
But the
also,
mhm.
I think talking to colleagues,
Yes.
thinking about other ways to advocate, whether bar association, whether legislation, whether, looking at your cases for opportunities to bring certain issues forward. I mean, as you say, exploring the solution
Mhm.
or solutions gives you something more to do than to just be the recipient of the stress.
Mhm.
Looking for ways to move a thing forward, and including, am I really able to continue practicing in this arena? Or do I want to continue practicing in this arena? And or if not practicing actively, are there ways that I can still be helpful with my knowledge? I mean, one of the things I feel like I've done in my career is shift and I've shifted from defense to prosecution, but the prosecution of lawyers is sort of related to public service for the public that I once served in criminal defense. And then using the skill and the technique for the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. You don't
Yes.
toss out any of the experiences, you sort of figure out how to use them for something else.
Yes, absolutely great. Yes, absolutely.
All right. Well, I don't see any more questions in the chat, and I see that we are just about out of time. I want to thank those of you who have hung on to the bitter end. And again, you'll get a copy of the slides and have an opportunity to revisit the recording. And also remember, we have other wonderful programs in our digital library. With that, thank you, Luz, and thank you all for coming today. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Bye bye.